Naomi has dreamed of becoming a pastry chef since childhood. When she turned 7, she first tried to make a cake with her mother. She helped her to put cream between cake layers. At that moment, the little girl realized what she wanted to do for the rest of her life. Her mother was making money by making pastries. She even wanted to open her own pastry shop, but there was one factor that prevented her from fulfilling this dream. Naomi's father was drinking heavily. He used to drink alcohol only on weekends. But later, Peter started drinking every day. Eventually, the man was fired from his job. Naomi's mom had to provide for the whole family. She worked as a clerk at school until the evening, and when she came home from work, she would make cakes, no matter how tired she was. But still, the money she earned wasn't enough to pay for all the family's needs. When Naomi turned 18, she decided to start making pastry as well. But her mother insisted that she needed to get an education and a normal job because it was impossible to earn enough money by making cakes. Naomi didn't want to argue with her mom, so she enrolled in college to become an accountant because they had no money to pay for university. Unfortunately, Naomi's mother chose the profession, not Naomi, because her mother believed that with such a diploma, you can always find a job and make enough money. A year later, Naomi's father died of alcoholism. The life of Natalie and her daughter became even more difficult, as they used all of their savings to pay for the funeral. But sometimes it seemed to them that they were even slightly happy that he had died because now, no one would make their tough life even more difficult. Naomi hated her college and her profession. She constantly wanted to drop out of college, but she couldn't do that because she knew how important it was to her mom. In the 3rd year of college, the girl didn't know yet that soon, her life would completely change. A student from another city, David, transferred to their college, and unlike Naomi, he loved his future profession and even planned to enter the university. Many girls in their college liked him, but he chose Naomi. David invited Naomi for a cup of coffee, and she told him that she didn't want to work as an accountant, but dreamed of becoming a pastry chef. "Be patient, we're already in our 3rd year of college," David said. "Your mom will be happy if you get a degree in economics. After that, you can work anywhere you want. But if you marry me, you don't have to work at all. You can make cakes as much as you want." "This is our first date, but you're already talking about marriage," Naomi said, laughing. "When I first saw you, I knew right away that you would marry me," the guy replied confidently. And David wasn't lying. Naomi and David got married a month after graduating from college. As the guy planned, he entered the university. Meanwhile, Naomi still had to work as an accountant for a while because the young couple needed money. David was one of the best students at the university. In his 2nd year of university, he began working part-time for a big company. Naomi was happy with David. They weren't rich and couldn't afford to buy a car or an apartment, but they had enough money for basic needs. A year after the wedding, Naomi's mom died. It turned out that the woman had heart problems for a long time, but she constantly could not find the time and money for a medical examination. Naomi suffered a lot. She got 2 weeks off to recover from her mom's death and spent this time in her mom's apartment, remembering how happy she was here as a child. But now this apartment was empty. There was no carpet on the floor where she and her dad used to assemble a railroad and run a toy train on it. Not even a sofa where her drunken father used to sleep all the time. Natalie got rid of it right after her husband died. However, there was a whisk, which Naomi used to whip cream for the first time in her life, and a rotating stand on which Natalie decorated her sweet pastry masterpieces. Naomi didn't want to leave this apartment, and there was no point. Why rent an apartment if now they have a place to live? David supported his wife in this idea. They renovated the apartment, changed the wallpaper, and replaced some of the furniture. Only memories remained from the past atmosphere, which were captured in photos. Little by little, Naomi recovered after her mother's death, but it was still hard for her to work as an accountant. David often repeated to his beloved wife that he would keep his word and she would not have to work. She only needed to wait a little until he got a promotion at work and finished university. After a while, the couple started thinking about a baby, but they talked it over and decided to postpone it until better times. 3 years passed. David kept his word. He managed to achieve everything he had dreamed of. He got a promotion at work, and Naomi finally quit her hated job and started making pastry. One day David came home from work with a strange expression on his face. He was acting strangely and asking some strange questions. "David, what interesting adventures can I have at work?" Naomi laughed. "I've spent my whole day at home. One client didn't come to pick up the cake today, so you can eat it with tea." David eagerly ate a piece of cake and then began to praise his wife. That's when Naomi realized what was the reason for this strange behavior. "What are you up to? Is there something you want to ask me?" Naomi asked. "I'm thinking about buying a car," David replied quickly, lowering his eyes. It seemed that he was waiting for permission from his wife to make this purchase. Naomi didn't mind. A car would really make their lives more comfortable. Now they would not have to rush to the bus to go somewhere. Moreover, they were planning a baby, so a car was a necessity. They already had some savings, so Naomi suggested looking for some inexpensive cars together. But David said unexpectedly, "I already know what kind of car I need, but the problem is that we need to get a loan. Our savings won't be enough for this purchase." Naomi immediately got indignant. "Why buy such an expensive car? Our savings would be enough for a good used car." "You don't understand." David looked away. "I hold a senior position at work. Actually, I'm almost the most important person in the company. Even simple managers drive fancy cars. I can't buy a cheap used vehicle." "That's a very strange explanation. Does anyone care what kind of car you drive? And why do you even care about someone else's opinion?" "You don't understand how important this is," her husband replied seriously. "I'm constantly attending very important meetings. And if I arrive in an old car, I'll give my partners the wrong impression. And anyway, it's better to get a new car. An old used car will require a lot of investments." The last argument about investments in a used car worked better than the reasoning about her husband's alleged reputation. Naomi approved the purchase of an expensive but reliable and safe car. But it turned out that purchasing an expensive car wasn't something David had been afraid to ask Naomi about. "Like I said, we need to get a loan to buy this car, but I can only get a loan secured by your apartment. Just because I don't have anything else." Naomi put down the plate she was washing and looked seriously at her husband. She was afraid to take such a risk. "What if something goes wrong?" she said. "What if you get fired from your job? Then the bank will repossess our apartment for debts. Where will we live then?" "Naomi," David said softly and moved closer to his wife. He took her hand and continued speaking. "That's not going to happen. You won't be affected by this loan in any way. Even if I get fired from this job, I will get another job. You know I'll do everything I can to make sure you're happy and well off." Naomi resisted a little more, voicing her concerns. But eventually, David managed to convince her. The man had never once lied to her and always fulfilled his promises. A month later, they bought a new car. David immediately took Naomi for a ride. They drove along the highway, admired nature, and enjoyed their happiness. Suddenly, the woman asked to urgently stop the car. She felt nauseous. "There are probably too many turns on the road. I'll try to drive more carefully so you don't feel nauseous again," David said when Naomi got back into the car. "I don't think that's the reason I feel bad," she uttered, sipping some water. "I've been feeling sick for a second week now. Maybe another one of our dreams is about to come true." David got excited and decided to clarify. "Are you saying that you are pregnant?" "I'm afraid it's possible," Naomi replied. "I'll see a doctor tomorrow." "Naomi, my love, I can't believe it. I'm so happy." A happy David shouted. "But what are you afraid of? We've been dreaming of having kids for so long." "I just don't think it's the right time," Naomi answered. "How are we going to cope with a loan and a baby? The baby will require a lot of money." "Naomi, have I ever told you that I'll do everything I can to make sure you live a prosperous life?" David winked at his wife and asked with a smile, "Have I ever failed to keep my promise?" Naomi calmed down a little, for she trusted her husband. David really always kept his promises, but she had no idea how he managed to do it. David continued to provide for his family, but Naomi could no longer make and sell cakes because of morning sickness. The couple was expecting the birth of their daughter. David spent more and more time in the office to provide for his wife and future daughter. He had to handle more clients, close deals faster, and make a lot of reports. He wanted only the best for his family, but he didn't realize how his job could affect his loved ones. If he had known about the consequences, he would have hated himself the moment he decided to get his first loan to buy a car. Yes, after getting the first loan and buying the car, David got several more loans from other banks, but Naomi found out about it accidentally. But that was not the worst news for her. Naomi and David's daughter Alice was already 3 years old. One day the girl was very cranky. Alice had been in a bad mood since early morning. First, she refused to eat. Then she poured a whole cup of milk on the floor. In the afternoon, Alice scattered toys in the room and didn't want to go for a walk. Naomi was exhausted that day. She finally put Alice to bed in the evening and then sat down on the couch to relax. Suddenly, she realized it was already 3 in the morning, but David was still not home. Sometimes the man would stay late in the office, but not that long. Naomi tried to call him, but David's phone was off. The woman didn't have any suspicions about her husband's infidelity or anything like that. She was sure that if he didn't answer the phone, then something was wrong. Apparently, Alice had a premonition of something bad. That's why she was cranky all day. 20 minutes later, Naomi received a call on her phone, but not from David. It was an unfamiliar number, and the woman's heart raced. She answered the call with a trembling voice and realized she had received a call from the hospital. 5 minutes later, Naomi knocked on the neighbor's door. A 19-year-old girl lived there. She and Naomi didn't really communicate. They only politely said hello when they saw each other, but right now Naomi urgently needed someone's help. "What's wrong? It's 3 o'clock in the morning," Anna said, woken by a loud knock on the door. "If it's not a fire, I'll never forgive you for this." "Anna, please forgive me. I understand this is not the best time for guests. But I really need help," Naomi answered and folded her hands in a gesture of supplication. "My husband got in a car accident. I got a call from the hospital. They said I need to come there urgently. I just wanted to ask you to spend the night at our apartment. My daughter is sleeping there. I can't leave her alone." Anna yawned loudly and asked her to wait, and after a moment she came out of her apartment putting on a robe. Naomi quickly showed her what to feed Alice if she didn't get home before morning. The woman said that the girl could take whatever she wanted from the refrigerator too, but Anna almost didn't listen to her. The girl sat on the sofa in the living room, closed her eyes, and dozed off. Naomi called a cab and quickly ran outside. On the way to the hospital, the woman prayed only about one thing. She prayed to God for David to survive. But Naomi didn't know yet that there was news even worse than the car accident her husband had gotten into. "Why are you taking me to the morgue?" Naomi asked, realizing that the doctor was taking her somewhere in the basement. The woman knew the way to the morgue very well, for she had seen her mother there. With each step, Naomi's body resisted more and more, and gradually she realized what had happened. "Doctor, why aren't you telling me anything? What happened to my husband? Why are we going to the morgue?" Naomi spoke in a trembling voice. The woman stopped at the morgue door. Of course, she had already realized that she would never hug David again, never talk to him. She realized that, but she still tried not to think about it until she entered that scary room. She was afraid to go inside because once she walked into that scary room, her life would be divided into before and after. "We are going for body identification," the doctor finally answered, lowering his eyes. The doctor was tired. The heart in the woman's chest froze. "A body identification?" she repeated slowly. "But that doesn't mean it's my husband there, right?" "Let's just go to the morgue, and you can see the body yourself," the doctor pronounced. He was exhausted and irritated, but he realized he shouldn't show it to the woman who was about to go through a difficult ordeal. Everyone at the hospital was sure of the identity of the deceased because they had found his ID. But it was necessary to identify the body in any case. The doctor opened the door and led her into the room. The woman immediately smelled a terrible odor. When she saw the body on the table, she felt sick to her stomach. "Ready?" the doctor asked. Naomi nodded, clutching the handkerchief tightly in her hands. The doctor pulled the sheet away from David's face. Tears immediately flowed from the woman's eyes. She screamed loudly and almost fainted, but the doctor managed to pick her up and took her outside to get some fresh air. The investigators were already waiting for her there. The doctor gave Naomi a sedative so that she could talk to the police calmly. And yet, she couldn't come to her senses for a long time. The woman shrank, bent over, and only howled quietly instead of speaking. When the medicine finally worked, they told her what had happened. David didn't notice the warning sign and drove onto the railroad track. The barrier closed right in front of him, and there were cars behind him. He had nowhere to drive. Of course, upon seeing the car, the train tried to slow down, but it was too late. David died in a few seconds. His last thoughts were that he had left his family in a terrible situation. The man only managed to say quietly, looking at the train, "I'm sorry." From that day on, Naomi didn't live but existed like a robot. She automatically repeated the usual daily routine. In the morning, she had to wash her face, feed her daughter, go for a walk with her, come back home, feed her again, and put her to bed. The woman herself almost didn't eat. After the funeral, her condition didn't improve much. Nothing could bring her back to normal. But she didn't know yet that this wasn't the only ordeal she had to endure. 1 month passed after David died. Naomi began to make cakes again and save some money. One day, she was making a cake in the kitchen as usual when suddenly smelled the acrid odor of smoke. Naomi ran out into the hallway and saw that her front door was on fire. She quickly scooped up a bucket of water and put out the fire. It seemed to her that someone had deliberately set her door on fire. Naomi walked out of the apartment and saw the words written in red paint on the wall. "Pay back the debt." That's how the girl found out how David provided a happy and prosperous life for her and her daughter. It turned out that the man owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to debt collectors. David got numerous loans from different banks and then simply stopped paying them off because he had no money. Naomi found out that the company where her husband worked was bankrupt. For the last few months, David earned almost nothing. But that wasn't the biggest problem either. About a week after the door was set on fire, the bailiffs came to Naomi's apartment. They were going to sell it. David got his first loan against Naomi's apartment, and he stopped paying off that loan a long time ago. Naomi begged to give her some time. She promised to find money, but the bailiffs told her that it was already impossible to change anything. "This is my only place to live," Naomi cried. "Are you suggesting me and my child become homeless?" "Miss, there is nothing we can do to help you," the bailiffs told her. "While we are busy with the paperwork, try to pay off some part of the loan." The man handed Naomi a paper with the amount on it. The woman realized that she needed to find a new place to live because she would never be able to get that much money quickly. David has not been paying off the loan for a very long time, and the amount has increased several times over. Moreover, David had problems with debt collectors. Naomi could not even sell her husband's car. The car turned into a pile of iron after the accident. Naomi desperately tried to find money or a place to live, but she failed. Eventually, Naomi and Alice found themselves homeless. They had no relatives, and no one they knew agreed to help them. "Anna, can I stay in your apartment for a little while?" Naomi asked her neighbor. "I'm sorry, but I'm renting this apartment. If the landlord finds out, I will have to look for a new place to live too," Anna replied. Naomi got down on her knees and begged to allow her to spend the night there, but Anna refused. "It's warm outside now. Besides, I believe there are many facilities that help homeless people," Anna answered calmly. "I'm sorry, but there's nothing else I can do to help you." The girl slammed the door shut. Naomi leaned her back against the wall and cried bitterly. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Alice said quietly. "My little girl, I'm hungry too, but we need to be patient for a while," Naomi answered. They walked out of the building and Naomi looked around. Where were they supposed to go now? The woman didn't have much money left. She realized it would only be enough for a few days. Naomi took her daughter by the hand and took a step forward. Suddenly, a black bag fell in front of them. The woman quickly looked up and saw her neighbor closing the window and hiding behind the curtain. The woman looked at the bag and noticed there was a note tied to it. "I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do to help you." Naomi picked up the bag, opened it, and saw that there was a box of cookies, a few chocolate bars, a carton of milk, and bread. "Thank you," Naomi shouted, pulled out the cookies, gave them to her daughter, and they walked forward. The woman didn't know where they were going. Naomi didn't plan to spend the night on the street. The woman had heard of people sleeping at train stations, so she decided to go there. That night, Naomi and Alice slept in the waiting room of the train station. They had some food, so they managed to save some money. Alice still didn't understand what was going on and why they had to spend the night in some crowded place. "Mommy, are we going somewhere?" the naive girl asked in the morning. "No, baby," Naomi answered. "We're just going to stay here for a while." But they didn't succeed in spending another night there. In the evening, a train station employee approached Naomi and decided to clarify which train they were waiting for. "Honestly, we're not waiting for any train," Naomi replied quietly, after taking the man aside so her daughter wouldn't hear this conversation. "We just need to spend the night somewhere until I figure out a solution to my situation." "Miss, this is not a hotel," the man answered her sternly. "If you need somewhere to sleep, you can get a hotel room. I have to ask you to leave the waiting room. Otherwise, I will have to call the police." Naomi asked not to do that. She said she and her daughter would leave the train station right away. It was so painful for her to realize they were being kicked out even of this place. She still couldn't believe her life was falling apart. She had always dreamed she would provide Alice with the best childhood, filled with happiness and pleasant memories. But they ended up homeless. When Naomi found herself on the street with the realization that she had nowhere to go at all, she was angry at her deceased husband. She had always been sure that he was the most honest and reliable man. She loved and trusted him. But eventually, their daughter became homeless, and it was David's fault. How could he let this situation happen? How was he ever going to deal with his debts? He's been lying this whole time. If David hadn't lied, Naomi would have found a job and together they would have gotten through their problems. But he kept saying that everything was fine and that Naomi didn't have to work. And he kept getting more loans. Then Naomi started to get angry with herself. Why hadn't she noticed that her husband was in serious trouble? But David really never told his wife about the problems at work. While Naomi was reflecting on her life, Alice was playing on the playground. The woman didn't notice how she and her daughter came to some park. She sat on a bench, and her daughter immediately went to play on the slide and swings. But suddenly Naomi heard her daughter scream, "Mommy, look, the stroller's rolling and there's no one around." The woman didn't immediately realize what Alice was telling her. When she heard her daughter's loud cry, she immediately got up from the bench to come and help the child. But the girl was fine. She was pointing her finger somewhere and repeating, "Mommy, look, the stroller is rolling toward the road." Naomi looked in the direction her daughter was pointing and got scared. The stroller was rolling down the sidewalk towards the roadway. Naomi immediately looked to the right and saw that the girl who was driving the car wasn't even looking at the road. She was talking on her phone and looking in the mirror. The woman quickly ran up to the stroller and grabbed its handle. And a second later, a car whizzed by there at breakneck speed. Naomi looked at the blue-eyed boy who was lying in the stroller. The poor baby didn't even realize what had happened. He just looked at his savior and blinked. Tears flowed down the woman's cheeks because she was so frightened that the life of this sweet baby could end. Suddenly, a man ran up and hugged Naomi. "I don't even know how to thank you," the stranger said. "You just saved my son. How can I ever thank you? Ask for anything." The woman was confused and didn't know what to say. At that moment, Alice ran up to her and grabbed her mom's hand. "Mommy, someone can steal our belongings," the girl said. "Why did you leave our bags there?" "What a sweet girl," the man said and smiled as he looked at the girl. "Who needs our belongings?" Naomi said, but then added, "Okay, go to the bench and watch our bags." The man listened attentively to the conversation between mother and daughter. While they were talking, he looked at them carefully. They didn't look like homeless people, although their clothes were stained in some places. But the first thing the stranger noticed were the sad eyes of the woman who had rescued his son. It seemed that the woman had been sad for a long time, and that something had happened to her. "Why don't you tell me the reason you went out for a walk with heavy bags?" the man suggested. Naomi agreed. She was ready to accept any help from anyone. After all, she had no choice. As they walked to the bench, the man introduced himself. His name was Benjamin. Naomi immediately realized that Benjamin was a successful businessman. He was wearing very expensive shoes, a jacket, and a watch, and in general looked very self-confident. Meanwhile, Benjamin couldn't understand the social status of his new friend. She didn't look like homeless. Naomi didn't tell him about her whole life but shared only the events of the last few months. She said that her husband had recently died and that he had a lot of debts, and as a result, she and her daughter ended up living on the street, as they were kicked out even from the train station. "You have such a difficult fate," Benjamin said as he listened to the story of a poor woman. "And after all these events in your life, you managed to remain such a kind person. You decided to save someone else's baby, risking your life." "Any person would do the same," Naomi said. "You better tell me, how come you lost the stroller with your son? You don't seem like an irresponsible person." "It was the nanny who lost the stroller, not me," Benjamin replied. "Can you imagine? She told me that someone snatched the stroller out of her hands. But I think she's lying. She must have been staring at her phone as usual and forgot to put the stroller on the brake. She called me crying and told me that someone kidnapped Frank." Naomi dared to ask about why the nanny was walking with his son and not the baby's mom. Benjamin was a little embarrassed by the question and replied that the baby doesn't have a mom, which is why he was walking with the nanny. "You still haven't told me how I can thank you," the businessman said, "but after your story, I realized what I could do for you." Benjamin said that he lives in the capital and came to this small town to sell his restaurant. It barely makes him any profit. He inherited it from his father. "You can do whatever you want with this restaurant. It's yours now," Benjamin said. "There is no one on the premises now, but I keep paying all the utilities. You can stay there for a while. The restaurant has a kitchen, and there's even a shower room. I'm sure it's better than living on the street." Naomi was happy because the man offered her not just a room, but a whole restaurant. She immediately realized what she would do there. Benjamin thought that the woman and her daughter would just live there. He didn't know that he was giving the premises to a wonderful pastry chef, moreover, with a degree in accounting. Benjamin took Naomi to his restaurant. The premises were in a terrible state. All the furniture was upside down. The tables and chairs were covered with a huge layer of dust, and some of the windows were broken. But the woman looked at it all in a completely different way. She was already imagining how she could decorate the place. "I will give you the keys to the restaurant and go home. The purpose of my visit to this town was to sell this restaurant. Now I have no reason to stay here," Benjamin said. "Tomorrow I will send a lawyer to you. He will give you permission to use the premises so that the police will not have any unnecessary questions." Naomi could not contain her emotions and hugged Benjamin tightly. "Mommy, is this our new house?" Alice asked as the man walked away. "No, sweetie, it's much better than a house," Naomi answered happily. The woman immediately began to clean up the premises. She really wanted to transform the place. Luckily, she met Benjamin when she had not yet spent all her savings on food. Naomi quickly pulled out all the money she had and began to calculate if she had enough money to buy a basic set of groceries. "I think there's enough money for 10 cakes, the woman said. "I should check what we have here. Maybe I can sell something we don't need." Alice watched excitedly as her mother walked around the restaurant, examining stuff and moving the furniture. 2 hours later, the woman realized they hadn't eaten anything yet, so she pulled out the rest of the cookies the neighbor had given them. But she had to go to the store for fresh milk. It took Naomi only 1 month to clean up the premises. She cleaned all the walls, fixed the broken chairs and tables, and organized the utensils. "It looks pretty good," the woman pronounced, admiring the results of her work. The woman found a stack of papers in the office, wrote an advertisement for the pastry shop, and placed them all over the city. The very next day, she received her first order. After the client tried the cake, she immediately said she would recommend it to all her friends. "The interior doesn't look as fancy as it could," the girl said, looking around. "But I've never tried a more delicious cake. You know there are no good pastry shops in our town." That's how Naomi started her own business and gradually began to get more and more customers. She saved a little money for herself and her daughter, and the rest was invested in the work and renovation of the restaurant. Alice gladly helped her mother, posted ads about the pastry shop, and even helped to cook and clean. 6 months passed. The small restaurant was becoming more and more popular. Naomi felt herself not just a pastry chef, but a real businesswoman. Of course, her accounting education came in handy. But even though it was a very small town, there was competition there. The owners of other restaurants noticed that the old restaurant began to attract clients again. Naomi's business was gradually growing. She hired excellent staff, which allowed her to expand her assortment. Many different inspections began to come to the restaurant, but the woman was not afraid. She didn't want to lose what she created. This restaurant was the only chance she and her daughter would have a normal future. The inspectors from the fire department and sanitary service were satisfied with the results of the inspections. Naomi also treated them to her specialty cake and promised to make 3 orders for them free of charge. All the inspectors were satisfied, but when the officials came to check the food license, there were problems. But Benjamin helped her with that. He was surprised when he heard that Naomi managed to renovate the restaurant. The man paid the required amount of money, and no one had any more questions for Naomi. After that situation, Benjamin forgot about this town and this restaurant again. The man didn't believe that a homeless woman could succeed in the restaurant business, and he paid for that license only to avoid problems, because he was still the owner of the restaurant. Naomi relaxed and continued to work and develop her business. 3 years have passed since Benjamin gave Naomi the restaurant. The businessman had long forgotten about the situation with the license. He was sure that the woman and her daughter were just living in his building. But one day Benjamin's assistant advised him to sell the restaurant. "We cooperate with big foreign companies, but at the same time, you are the owner of some obscure restaurant. What does she do there? Selling pies? Is that the kind of reputation you want?" "Henry, I can't do that to her. After all, she saved my son's life," Benjamin said stubbornly. "I think you've already thanked that woman enough by letting her live there for a few years," Henry continued. "At least go there and check your premises. Maybe she's already moved out." Benjamin agreed that he should check on Naomi's business. After all, he had no idea who she was, and he didn't want any trouble. The man left Frank with the nanny and headed for the small town. At the entrance to the town, he noticed a billboard saying that there was a restaurant with a Michelin star in this town. There was also a picture of the restaurant's interior. "Wow," Benjamin marveled. "I can't believe there could be a Michelin star restaurant in such a small, God-forsaken town." "It must be the restaurant of that homeless woman," Henry joked. He was sure the boss would feel sorry for Naomi again and change his mind about kicking her out and selling the premises. So he decided to accompany his boss to this town to remind Benjamin why they had come here. But the closer Benjamin drove to his restaurant, the more he was surprised. There were more and more cars on the road. It seemed that all the cars were driving in the same direction as him. And when the man reached his destination, he couldn't utter a word. "I didn't know people in a small town made such good money. There are so many expensive cars here. I wonder why they are all parked in front of my building," a surprised Benjamin said. "The men park it on the other side of the road, as there was nowhere to park at the restaurant, and got out of the car." "No, this can't be," Benjamin said. He pointed his finger at his restaurant. There was a sign confirming the Michelin star. "How is that even possible?" Henry wondered. "Henry, have you even checked the revenue this restaurant generates for us?" Benjamin asked his assistant. Henry blushed and lowered his head. Benjamin pressed his lips together irritably. They approached the entrance, but some stranger immediately ran up to them and said, "I'm sorry, but all the tables here are reserved," he said. "I made a reservation a month ago, and I'm not giving up my table to you." "I actually own this place," Benjamin said seriously and adjusted his jacket. "You don't look like Naomi," the stranger said indignantly. Benjamin ignored the man's further complaints and opened the door. The interior looked exactly as in the picture on the billboard at the entrance to the town. In this cozy and stylish space, it was simply impossible to recognize the place Benjamin left years ago. Alice immediately ran up to Benjamin. "Hello, I remember you," the girl shouted happily. "Can you bring Mommy here or take me to her?" Benjamin asked politely. A happy Alice nodded and took the businessman's hand. Naomi was overjoyed when she saw Benjamin. "I thought I would never see you again," the woman said. Naomi looked gorgeous. It seemed that she had become 10 years younger and lost weight. "How can a person who makes pastry look so wonderful?" Benjamin said with a smile. Naomi blushed and offered the man to take a seat at the table. She told how she managed to improve the restaurant so much. she was surprised when she found out that a restaurant critic had visited the restaurant. Apparently, he helped the restaurant win such an important award. Our restaurant was included in a list of the best restaurants in our town, and then we were featured in an article published in a very important magazine. After reading it, I found out that a very famous traveler had visited us. He has a blog on the internet about his travels, where he told about our restaurant. He has several million followers, and that's why people from other cities started coming to us. But why didn't you tell me about it? Benjamin said in surprise. How could I have missed such information? At this moment, Henry coughed softly. I tried to call and text you. I even managed to find your business email, but you ignored all my emails, Naomi said, looking at Henry with disbelief. Then Benjamin looked suspiciously at his assistant too. I was just protecting you from unnecessary information, Henry tried to justify himself. I thought this woman just wanted to ask you for money or some other kind of help. You gave me the premises yourself. That was 3 years ago, Naomi added. You own the premises and rent it to me. But I still wanted to tell you about my progress, but you were unavailable. I don't need the income from this restaurant, Benjamin said. It's your business and your merit. I have no idea how much work you had to do to get to this level. Naomi blushed again and suggested Benjamin to have dinner together, to talk about the restaurant in an informal atmosphere, and to share what had happened in her life during these 3 years. Benjamin happily agreed. He actually was going to suggest the same thing. Henry left for the capital because he realized that now his boss was mad at him. The woman shared her success story. Benjamin tried to understand the secret of this success and sincerely admitted that he would not have been able to bring a restaurant to this level. My secret is simple. I love what I do. I always dreamed of becoming a pastry chef, Naomi answered modestly. Besides, I was very motivated. When I first entered this restaurant, I had nothing at all, and I realized that I had to work very hard to give my daughter a decent future. Next year, Alice will go to school. I decided to send her to a good private school so that she can get a decent education, and in the future, she can enter a good university abroad. She dreams of studying abroad just like me. Benjamin stopped eating and asked, though it was hard to do so because the food was brilliant. What do you mean just like you? You mean you studied abroad? Benjamin asked in surprise. Yes, I studied abroad, Naomi replied. My husband David had always tried to make all my dreams come true. When he found out I was pregnant, he really wanted to make me happy and paid for my studies at a pastry school in France. I went to Paris to a school where the world's best pastry chefs taught. Perhaps that also helped the restaurant win a Michelin star. I can understand your husband, Benjamin said and smiled enigmatically. I would also wish to make all dreams come true for a woman like you. Naomi blushed again. She noticed the way the man was looking at her. She was a little embarrassed because it seemed like they were on a romantic date. Benjamin admired not only the beauty of this woman, but also her strong personality. He had no idea how hard she had to work to get these results in such a short period of time. Now you know almost everything about me, Naomi said enigmatically, but all I know about you is that you have a son. Why don't you tell me a little about yourself? To be honest, I have nothing much to tell, Benjamin said. I haven't suffered any tragic situations, and I've never performed any feats. What do you mean you haven't performed feats? Naomi wondered. You're raising a son who doesn't have a mom. Isn't that a feat? What happened to your wife? I never even had a wife. Benjamin tried to change the topic of conversation, but Naomi was persistent. This woman really knows how to get what she wants, Benjamin thought. And he decided to tell his story. The reason for this reticence was that he was ashamed of his past. Benjamin was born into a family of millionaires. He had never known poverty. The man inherited all his money, business, and stocks from his parents. Since childhood, he was trained to run the family's business. When he turned 30, he realized that he hadn't created anything in his life on his own. Everything he had inherited from his father. Benjamin realized that he wanted to start a family, but most of all, he wanted to have an heir. But Benjamin could not find a decent woman to start a family with. All the girls he met didn't plan to become mothers in the near future. Once Benjamin went to a nightclub where one of his friends was having a bachelor party. Of course, there were many dancers. Benjamin went home with one of them, and 3 weeks later, that dancer girl, Lily, came to his house again. The girl said that she was pregnant and needed money for an abortion. Benjamin immediately told her that he would not let this happen. "Were you going to marry a girl you met in a nightclub?" Naomi asked in shock. "I just wanted to have a baby," Benjamin tried to justify himself. "There was a complicated situation, but she refused to marry me anyway." Naomi didn't understand why Lily refused to marry a millionaire, but at least she gave birth to a baby. Benjamin decided to tell how the story ended. He persuaded Lily to give birth to his baby and promised to provide for her for the rest of her life and raise the baby himself. Of course, the girl could not refuse such an offer. "It's not surprising," Naomi laughed. "She decided to just get the money and live happily ever after. But how is it possible that a mother doesn't want to see her baby?" "Lily will never be able to see anyone ever again," Benjamin replied quietly. "Though when she was alive, she didn't want to see her son either. You know, I thought I'd provide Lily with the life of her dreams, but it turned out that my offer killed her." Benjamin took a sip of wine from his glass. His throat was dry. Then he continued his story. After the childbirth, Lily gave him the baby and never asked about her son. The man transferred money to Lily's bank account every month, as promised. Apparently, her life was so boring that she started spending that money on drugs. "First, Lily became addicted to alcohol," Benjamin said, "and then she tried drugs. Her heart couldn't take it. It's been almost 3 years since she died, but I still can't forgive myself for it. That's why I didn't want to tell you the whole truth." "But it wasn't your fault," Naomi said, and placed her palm on Benjamin's hand. The man flinched a little in surprise. "It was her choice. You helped me too, letting me stay in this building. I could have started drinking alcohol too, or lived here in the ruins begging for alms on the street. But I chose a different path. Lily also had many options for using the money you were giving her." "Thank you," Benjamin said quietly and looked Naomi in the eye. It seemed the man had been waiting for those words from anyone since Lily's death, but he hadn't shared his feelings with anyone. His friends didn't even know that Benjamin was thinking every day about the girl he thought he had killed. Naomi's situation was much worse than Lily's, but she managed to pull herself together and start her own business. She had only an abandoned restaurant and a desire to live and give a happy life to her daughter. The next day, Benjamin left for the capital, but he could not forget Naomi's beautiful eyes, which still seemed sad. Even though she managed to achieve a lot in business, Naomi was very lonely. Many successful men showed her signs of attention and tried to court her, but she turned them down. Benjamin suddenly realized that he would never meet such a motivated and kind woman as Naomi again. He realized that every time he opened his eyes in the morning, the first thing he thought of was her. One day, the man decided to text her and ask how she was doing. He typed a message but hesitated to send it for a long time and did it accidentally while trying to clean the phone screen. Naomi immediately replied. She also asked how he was doing. For 3 months, they communicated by text messages. Benjamin realized that he no longer wanted to talk to Naomi only by messages. He wanted to listen to her gentle voice, to look into her kind but a little sad eyes, to hold her hands and hug her as tightly as he did the day they first met. Finally, he came to this small town again, confessed his feelings, and proposed to move to the capital, promising to open a restaurant for her there. And she would definitely be able to take the new restaurant to the same level. "But how can I leave this restaurant?" the woman asked in surprise. "After all, I have invested a lot of effort and time in it. People love this restaurant. I can't just leave it." "I'm not suggesting you leave it," Benjamin said affectionately, "but you can find a good manager. The restaurant will continue to operate successfully, and you can come here as often as you want." Naomi accepted the offer. The point that in the capital, Alice will be able to attend a good school where they can prepare her for studying abroad, convinced the woman. It is difficult to find a school of such a level in a small town. Naomi appointed Anna as the restaurant manager. The same Anna who once wouldn't let her spend the night in her rented apartment. Naomi had long forgotten about that situation, so when the girl came to her asking for help, the woman hired her. Anna urgently needed money to pay her rent. Some bastards robbed her and took away everything her parents had sent. Mom and Dad didn't believe their daughter and assumed that she just wanted to buy new clothes. At first, Anna worked in a restaurant as a waitress, but the girl worked diligently and tried very hard to show good results. So a year later, Naomi promoted her to the position of her personal assistant. And now the woman has decided to entrust Anna with the restaurant, promoting her to the position of a restaurant manager. Alice was so happy when she found out that they were moving to a big city. She was even more excited when she found out that she was going to have a 3-year-old brother. But they never developed a brother-sister love. They treated each other as friends. When the girl turned 16, she went to study abroad. But Alice went to study not in France, as Naomi dreamed, but in Italy. Frank also went to Italy when he turned 18. 2 years passed. Alice and Frank were living in Italy and were happy together. They were going to tell their parents that they were planning to get married. "Finally, our kids will be here soon. Haven't seen them in over a year," Benjamin said the day before Frank and Alice arrived. "Right, Alice hasn't visited us in over a year. She is always preparing for fashion shows and making a new fashion collection," Naomi agreed with her husband. "By the way, she told me she wants to introduce us to her fiancé." "Wow," Benjamin marveled. "Frank also said he was coming with his fiancée." They looked at each other in surprise. Now the couple were looking forward even more to the day of their children's arrival. Naomi made a huge cake because she thought there'd be a lot of guests at home. Benjamin constantly praised his wife's cooking, noting that after the wedding, he gained a few pounds because of her pastry. "Don't blame me for that," Naomi laughed. "I eat my pastries too, but I'm not overweight." Benjamin laughed at his wife's joke, but their fun was interrupted by the butler, who informed them that a car had pulled up to the gate. The couple immediately went outside, but they saw no one but their children. As Frank and Alice approached their parents, Benjamin and Naomi looked at each other.
"But you said you were coming with your loved ones," Benjamin said.
"Is something wrong? When will our guests arrive?" Naomi dared to ask. Frank and Alice looked at each other, smiled, and then took each other's hands. "Daddy, meet my fiancée Alice," Frank announced proudly. "Mom, this is my fiancé. His name is Frank, and he's a wonderful man," Alice pronounced. Benjamin and Naomi sat down on the chairs on the terrace. It surprised them a lot. "I told you right away that they don't treat each other like brother and sister," shocked Naomi said. "That's wonderful news," Benjamin perked up. "I'm happy for our children, aren't you?" "I'm happy, but it's very unexpected," Naomi replied immediately. "But the wedding party should be thrown in our city." Frank and Alice laughed and answered that they didn't plan it any other way. Thus, another strong family was created. And after the wedding, the newlyweds went back to Italy. But they often came to visit their parents and invited them to Italy.